Okay, this is great. Let's get started. Tonight, first of all, I'll introduce myself. My name's Kristyna Culp, and I'm part of the Education Committee with the Extension Master Gardeners. And tonight, I would like to introduce Debbie Dillion, who has led us for the last 5 years. I did not realize it was 5 whole years you've been here. But she was with Extension Service before that in Virginia for 22 years. But she started when she was 5, right? 5 years old, right? And it sounds good, doesn't it? Yeah. And she has a BSA in, I'm going to read over here because I don't want to get the letters wrong, a BSA in Landscape Design and Urban Horticulture from the University of Arkansas, and a MS degree in Horticulture Science from Virginia Tech. So very good credentials there. And while she's been working with us at Union County, she is responsible for a lot of things like corralling the cats that are the Extension Master Gardeners. That is one thing. But she also does educational programs for lots of different people, just the general public, which is what this group is about, the Master Gardeners, obviously, the commercial horticulture producers in the area. She does classes on pesticide application, which I'm sure are a blast, and people in the nursery and landscape industry. So you've got a lot on your plate. And tonight, you can tell I'm not going to do this class because I don't have any lawn at all. Tonight, you're going to talk about lawns and what we should be doing with our lawn this time of year. Put it to bed so we don't have to mow it anymore. I think that's what most people want to hear. But I will give it to you, and I will shut up and enjoy.
Okay. Thank you, Kristyna. I'm going to share my screen. And I don't know, are you going to hang around, Kristyna? Because there's still people coming in that need to be admitted. Can you do that? Okay.
Maybe. I'm not sure if I can do it from here. I can try.
I made you a co-host.
Okay.
Can you see the participant list?
Yeah, no, hold on. I'm sorry, because I'm doing this on my phone, and
that's okay.
It's completely different interface, but I don't see a
know that once I start sharing my screen that I'll be able to see it.
I know. So there it is. There it is.
Can you see it? Okay.
Uh-huh. Yep.
All right.
Okay, I've got it. I can do it.
Okay. All right. So now you can see my slides, right?
Right. I can.
Okay. So we're going to talk about fall lawn care, and hopefully we're going to get a little taste of fall this weekend. I'm so looking forward to it. I can't wait to get out on a low humidity day and work in my garden. So what we're going to talk about tonight is Turfgrass Facts and Morphology. We'll talk about a little bit about cool and warm season turf grasses. So we'll look at variety selection, soil testing, fertility. The list goes on. Mowing, irrigation, cultivation, pest control, overseeding, irrigation. You know, I get so tired of hearing those meteorologists in Charlotte talk about all the rain and how much excess we have. It's all going along the Interstate 40 corridor. It misses where I live in Monroe. One of my coworkers got over 2 inches of rain the other day, and I got a 10th. So I've had irrigation going today while I've been working from home. You know, I go out there and move it every couple of hours. But Turfgrass Facts. Above ground, grass plants are actually 70 to 80% water. The clippings are 90%. They actually contain nutrients because as the plant's roots take up the moisture from the soil, they take up nutrients. So the clippings have up to 4% nitrogen, 2% potassium, and 0.5% of phosphorus. So why would you bag those up and send them off with your trash? You should leave them on your lawn. It's the best thing to do with them. Because it's adding those nutrients back into the soil to feed your lawn. 10,000 square foot lawn is going to contain about 6 grass plants per square inch. So that math works out to about 850 plants per square foot, or 8.5 million plants. That's a lot of plants. For you plant lovers, you didn't know you had that many plants in your lawn, did you? It's a lot. Below ground, 90% of the weight of the grass is in its roots. A single grass plant can have 387 miles of roots. That's per square foot, 329,000. There are 3 billion miles of roots in a 10,000 square foot lawn. And the roots are biomass that as the plants, the roots don't live forever. So they'll grow and then they die. They grow and then they die. So that is continually adding organic matter to the soil. That's why grasslands, lands that have been grass for hundreds of years, they will have a lot more organic matter in them than forest will. You know, you think forest and all those leaves, there's lots of organic matter. Well, there's actually more in areas that have been in grasslands for hundreds of years. Talk about turfgrass morphology. Turf grasses belong in the Poaceae family of plants, and that grasses are monocots. And the reason for that is they only have one true seed leaf when that seed germinates. And that's what this little diagram here at the upper right shows. The monocot on the left will have one seed leaf. So think of corn that you might plant in your garden. When it first pops up, it's just got one little leaf, versus a bean plant will have two. Those are not true leaves. Those are called cotyledons, and they are actually in that seed when it is planted. Other members in this family, I mentioned corn, but oats, barley, rye, and bamboo. They all belong in this grass family, this Poaceae family. Monocots versus dicots. You saw the one seed leaf versus two seed leaves. There are other differences between them. With monocots, the leaf veins are parallel versus the dicots have net-shaped or kind of a webbed, if you will, veining on their leaves. With monocots, the reason grasses will tolerate mowing, our lawn grasses, is because their growing point is at the base of the plant, low to the ground. So when you mow the grass, you're not cutting off that growing point. Versus trees and shrubs, the dicots, their growing point is at the tip. So if you cut off the tip of the plant, it will branch on buds lower down and get bushier. But if you cut it off right at the soil line where there's no green, no buds, it will die. Most of your grasses, or all of your grasses, have the fibrous root system versus dicots have a taproot. But that taproot may only be there when it's young. And as the plant matures, that taproot kind of goes away and it does become more of a expanded flatter root system. Not all plants that have a taproot does it persist forever. Going into turfgrass morphology, and this is part of my job when people will bring in grasses or grassy weeds and they want to know how to manage them or what it is. These are the pieces of the parts of the grass plant you have to look at in order to identify them. You know, you look at the leaves, you look at how they're attached, you look at, if you can see the little circle on the left, you look at the collar and the ligule and the auricle and the sheath. It can get really complicated, and because they're grasses, they kind of all look alike. So it's not often an easy job to determine what type of grass you have. Sometimes you may have to say, I need to have the seed head. And, you know, most people when they mow are mowing off the seed head on their grasses that are in their lawn. So they may have to set aside a little piece, but, you know, you get better at doing the identification as you go along. But, you know, you have to know these different parts, and you have to know what's a node, what's a stolon, what's the sheath. You have to know what those parts are and where they are on the plant. So it's important. Stems, we have bunch type grasses, and then we have what are called stoloniferous or rhizomatous grasses. The bunch type grasses don't spread. And that upper right photo there is an example of a bunch type grass. That's a tall fescue. I think it's probably like what we call the contractor's grade tall fescue, which is a real coarse, tough. It's tough. It will survive. That's why contractors will plant it at new builds, because it will come up and grow. But it's a bunch type grass, meaning it does not spread. It grows in a clump, and that's it. So seeding is required if the grass thins out. If you get a disease that comes in and maybe you lose some of your grass, you have to overseed. And people who grow the tall fescue, they will often overseed this time of year because they've had thinning. Stolons and rhizomes, they spread away from the mother plant. And that's how you can have so many plants in a square foot. They run, and the bottom right photo is zoysia in my yard. This is the 4th year, and I'm getting close to being fully established from seed. Still got some bare spots that I've been working on this summer. I've been hand pulling weeds, and I've been applying fertilizer and irrigation. And if you look closely at that bottom photo, you can see how it is spreading and filling in those bare spots. There's all these, what you might think of as runners, but they're called, morphologically, they're called stolons. They're above ground stems that will root everywhere there's a node. So if you can see my little pointer here, here's the stem going here. Whoops, I'm sorry. Here's one running here. There are several of them running through this photo. And at each place where there's a little leaf blade, that is a node. And where that touches the soil, it will root, and that's a new little plant or a daughter plant. So, you know, this is a good thing when it's in the middle of your yard, but when they start running into an ornamental bed, that can be a problem. And zoysia is not as aggressive as Bermuda grass can be. The common Bermuda grass, we call it wiregrass because its stems, its stolons are tough. They're as tough as wire, and it can be very invasive. And because it does this creeping, it spreads into new areas, and it allows lawns or turf to recover from wear. And Bermuda is being used more and more in athletic fields for this reason, because it will tolerate wear a lot better and repair or recover itself than the bunch type grasses will, like the tall fescue. Bunch type grasses examples are the tall fescue, perennial ryegrass, annual bluegrass. Annual bluegrass is a little winter annual weed that pops up in lawns. And we really had a lot of it this past year. It started germinating in August, and it germinated all winter long. So it was a big battle with that this year. So if you had a lot of that, you should be putting down a pre-emergent now, because this will start to germinate as it cools off. Stoloniferous plants I mentioned: creeping bentgrass, centipede, buffalo, carpet grass, St. Augustine. What that means is they run the stems along the surface of the soil, and where they touch down, they root. Rhizomatous or Kentucky bluegrass, Bahia grass, and Johnson grass. Now, the only one you want is Kentucky bluegrass. You don't want the Bahia or the Johnson grass. Both of those are invasive from seed. But Kentucky bluegrass is often planted in with tall fescue as a mix, because it will help to knit and fill in where that bunch grass may not be. So it kind of ties it to cool season lawn together. And that's why when you go to buy seed at the store, you oftentimes see mixes that include tall fescue. They may have some perennial rye in them. They may have the Kentucky bluegrass. And then the two warm season grasses that are both stoloniferous and rhizomatous are Bermuda grass and zoysia grass. So this little diagram here shows the rhizomes. They're just like the stolons, except they're underground. So the rhizomes are just like kind of a bigger root or stem that grows underground, and then at a node, it will pop up a new little plant and send it up above the surface of the soil. So, you know, Bermuda grass and zoysia can both be somewhat invasive for that reason, in that they have those stems that run above and below the soil surface. Just looking at roots a little bit more, you know, you don't see the roots, so you don't think about them, but that's what the plant has to have to survive. You know, that's what takes up the nutrients and the water and carries it up to the top part of the plant. It anchors the plant in the ground. I took a little piece of zoysia this summer. They were replacing the water line in the street in front of my house, and they took out an old water meter that was didn't have anything in it. It just had the cover. So they took it out and left a bare spot. And so I took a little piece of that zoysia and a stem that had some nodes on it, and I covered it up with a little bit of soil, and I've got one little piece that has survived and is starting to grow. And that's because it established some roots. I was able to keep it moist enough to get some roots to grow. And once those roots get established, then the top part of the plant will start to take off. And you can see by this slide at the photo at the top, they produce extensive fibrous multi-branch root systems. So once you have a mature grass plant, it's hard to pull up. And I know what I thought of the annual bluegrass that I had in my yard this year was I hand pulled it. When they were little, like the plant over on the upper right-hand side, they were real easy to pop out. But once they got bigger and had a more established root system like the plant on the left, I almost had to have a digging tool, or the ground had to be really moist and soft for me to pull them out. So for that reason, they hold the soil. You know, they hold the soil in place. When it comes, you need to think about warm season versus cool season as when they grow. The roots of cool season grasses are going to grow in spring and fall. With warm season grasses, they grow when it's hot. They grow in the summertime. Shoot growth for the cool season, you're going to see it between temperatures of 60 to 75. And with the warm season, you know, it's a higher temperature. They like it warmer. The cool season is pretty much green year round, with the exception of if we get really hot and dry and you don't irrigate it. Now, it will go dormant if you get into those conditions and you're not irrigating your lawn. It will shut down, it will brown out, it will stop growing. Unless we have an extended drought, it will survive. And within a couple of weeks of when we start to get rain again, that stuff will green back up very, very quickly. Now, your warm season grasses, you know, it's a personal preference when it comes to the warm season grasses, because they brown out or turn a straw color with the first hard frost in the fall. And then they sometimes are slow to green up in the spring. It may be April before you start to really get green coming into your lawn with the warm season. But the thing about the warm season is they are more drought tolerant once they're established, so they don't need as much water. And I can't wait for my zoysia in my lawn to really get established fully, and then I'm going to stop the water. I'm going to wean it off the water, because water is expensive. In North Carolina, we have 3 what we call climatic zones. We've got the western, the Piedmont, and the coastal plains. So you can see here down at the bottom, we're in what's called a transition zone, which means we can grow both warm and cool season turf grasses, but neither one will be exceedingly excellent. You know, it's tough to grow either one of them because the heat, you know, they struggle with that, the humidity. And so it's a personal choice. You can grow them and they can look just fine without a lot of input, but you can spend lots of money and have a beautiful golf course quality lawn if you want. So what do you need to consider when you're planting turf grass? And a lot of times when I get called out to advise people if they're having problems with their lawns, it's usually one of the biggest things is too much shade. So turf grasses need sun, ideally 8 hours. Some of them will get by with less, 6. Zoysia grass, one of the reasons I selected it was it will take a little more shade than the Bermuda grass will. They need to have, a deep soil that's well drained. Consider, are you going to irrigate or not? Are you going to put in an irrigation system? If you have established trees and you start digging trenches to put in an irrigation system, you can damage the roots on those trees and they may start to decline. So you need to think about that. I'm just doing surface irrigation. I'm never going to install an irrigation system, but think about how you're going to use your lawn. I found this cute little picture today of this little boy and this puppy. Are you going to have kids or pets playing on it? Are you going to, play games? How are you going to use your lawn? You need to think about that. How much maintenance are you willing to do? And maintenance kind of turns into money. How much money are you willing to spend? I've never spent money on fertilizers and herbicides because my lawn was always 3 acres and I couldn't afford it. Now I'm on a little 1/4 acre lot with a couple thousand square feet of turf, and I'm spending more money than I've ever spent maintaining, trying to get this zoysia lawn established. So, you have to think about that. Do you want cool season where it stays pretty much green all year, or do you want warm season? Well, I grew up in southeast Arkansas. We didn't have any cool season grasses there, so I like that beautiful straw color that those warm season grasses turn in the wintertime. Now, I'll tell you, I had a lady call me a couple weeks ago, and she was having problems with her turf was bleaching out. When she left the message on the phone, she didn't tell me that they'd sprayed a herbicide to try to take out the Bermuda. And this particular herbicide, I can't remember which one it was that they had used, but it bleaches out the tall fescue. And so she was a wedding venue, so they were doing weddings, and so she couldn't have all these white patches out in her lawn. So they went online, they ordered some turf paint, and they painted the grass to cover up that bleaching, and then the plants grew out of it after a few weeks. But they told me, and they didn't tell me how much it cost, but they said it's not cheap. And, golf courses, football stadiums where they're on TV, when those fields just look gorgeous, you might consider that they may have used some turf paint to make those fields look that good. So here's just a chart that shows you, the different grasses, the western region, the Piedmont, the coastal plain, how they perform. And so if you would like to have this presentation and have this chart, this is one, I didn't go look up the link to it, but you can send me an email and I will send this presentation to you. And my email is simply ddillio@ncsu.edu. Maybe Kristyna could type that in the chat box for you. But it's just, again, it's DDD, that's D as in Delta, DDDILLIO@ncsu.edu. And this is just a good chart to help you make a decision, if you're going to maybe convert your yard from a cool season to a warm season, which do you choose? So I just wanted to put that in here, and I'll be happy to share the PowerPoint with you after the presentation. When it comes to management, soil testing, that's one of the first things we teach our Master Gardener volunteers is how important soil testing is. You just don't indiscriminately apply lime and fertilizer without testing the soil first. because you may be wasting money. You may not need it. You may over or under apply. And with that, especially if you over apply, you have the potential to contaminate the environment. You know, it gets washed away or leaches down through the soil. And for the most part, it's the nitrogen that can leach. It can leach through the soil, or it can be washed over the surface. And then oftentimes that, if you see ponds that have the green algae growing on them, that's related to nitrogen that's washed into that body of water. So, you know, and plus it costs you money if you're using too much. Soil testing will give you a level of your pH and your nutrients. It's generally recommended that you test about every 3 years, unless you're having a problem. The lime is best applied in the fall because it takes it a few months to react in the soil. So if you apply it in the fall, then, you know, you're kind of ready to go in springtime. Now, you can put lime down any time of the year, anytime the ground's not frozen. The recommendation is, if you get a soil test back, is don't apply more than 50 pounds per 1,000 square feet at a time. So if you were to get a soil test report back that told you you needed 75 pounds of lime per 1,000 square feet, you would split that into 2 applications about 30 days apart. The testing is free from April 1 to Thanksgiving, and that means it has to be in their house before Thanksgiving. If you mail it on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving and it doesn't get there until Saturday, they're going to hold it ransom and make you pay the $4 fee that goes into effect from Thanksgiving until March 31st. Consultation is available. And what that means is all of the home soil test kits, as we call them, that are distributed in Union County have my name listed on it as the consultant, if you will. So when you get your report back, if you have questions, you can give me a call. I can pull your report up in the Department of Agriculture system and look at it and see just what you're seeing and answer any questions that you've got. Is there a question? Any questions? No? Okay. So when it comes to soil testing, you know, pH for turf grasses should be in the 5.8 to 6.5 range. When it's in that range, the turf grasses will perform perfectly fine. If it's 5.9 or if it's 6.3, you won't really be able to see a difference in the grass itself. Now, if it's below that 5.8, you're usually going to have recommendations for lime to be added to bump that up into that desired range for your pH. Cool season grasses, this time of year with fertilizer, mid-November, mid-September and mid-November for like tall fescue, about a pound of nitrogen. And then for warm season grasses, you've missed the window if you've got zoysia for applying any nitrogen. You don't want to apply it too late to your zoysia or Bermuda, because if we get an early cold period in the winter time, they could be damaged. So zoysia, we've passed the window for applying up, and it's only a half a pound of nitrogen. Bermuda by mid-September. So you got a week or so if you've got Bermuda grass where you can make one more application of a half a pound of nitrogen. Now this is just related to fall applications of fertilizer. The cool season grasses, the best time to fertilize is in the fall, because what you want to push with those cool season grasses is root growth, because the roots are what gets the plant through the heat of the summer the next season. That's why oftentimes if you overseed in the spring, yeah, that grass will come up and grow, but usually when it gets hot and dry, it dies because it doesn't have enough of a root system to support itself. Versus when you seed in fall, the roots will continue to grow until the temperatures drop down to somewhere between, the soil temperatures drop down to somewhere between 40 and 45 degrees. And the warm season grasses, you start fertilizing those during the warm months of the summer when they're growing. So May, June, and then you skip to August. You know, depending on what level of maintenance you're at, whether it's low, medium, or high, low would be like maybe 1 to 2 pounds of nitrogen per year, versus high could be up to 4 pounds of nitrogen per year. But that's a lot of nitrogen. And I know I put more nitrogen on my lawn this summer than I have ever done before. And I've had to mow about every 3 to 4 days, because the grass that's there that's established is growing. But then I'm getting these stolons that are running across the ground that are 2 and 3 foot long. And that's what I'm trying to do, is fill in those bare patches that I still have left.
I don't think I'm going to sleep. I never know.
May I have a question? Okay, I'll keep going.
I've been checking the chat box, and people can put their questions in the chat box as well, if you'd like.
Okay. All right, good. Okay, I'll keep going then. This is just a chart that shows the seasonal nitrogen uptake. So yellow is Bermuda grass, blue is centipede, which is a low maintenance warm season grass. And I really don't have any experience with it, other than I don't think you're supposed to put more than like a pound of nitrogen on it a year. It doesn't like a lot of nitrogen. It doesn't want it. But this just shows you when that plant is actively growing, and the orange one is tall fescue. So it shows you when those plants are actively growing and when the roots are actually taking up the nitrogen. So you can see the orange is the cool season. They're taking up the nitrogen in the spring, and then they're taking it up in the fall once it starts to cool off. Versus the Bermuda grass, which is the warm season grass, you can see they're taking all the nitrogen up right in the heat of the summer. That's when they're actively growing. That's what they like, is that heat. So, you know, you're wasting your time if you put down fertilizer with the Bermuda after September. Plus, you may make it prone to winter damage. When it comes to mowing, the little diagram up in the upper right-hand corner shows you there is a direct relationship between how high you cut the grass and how much root growth you have. The shorter the height, the more shallow the root system is going to be, which is going to make it more prone to drought, you know, when we're not getting enough rain. The leaves manufacture and store the food, and mowing reduces the plant's storing capacity, because if there's not, you know, if the roots are in proportion to the top and you're mowing it real short, you're not going to have the storage capacity in that root system, because there's not as much root system there. Root growth is temporarily stopped so that the plant can grow new leaves. You know, it's putting energy into putting out new leaves, which are going to come along in 3 or 4 more days to cut off. So it's this battle. And in Virginia, when I lived in Virginia, again, we mowed like 3 acres, but it was mostly a cool season, you know, kind of pasture type grass. And I mowed it at like 5 inches, simply because it would stay greener longer into the summer. And so I'm sure it had the root system more on the left-hand side of that diagram, versus my zoysia probably is more closer over to the right-hand side, because I'm mowing it at about 1 inch, maybe 1.5 inches. You know, you mow the warm season grass is much lower. Cool season grasses, you know, 2.5 to 3 inches. I pushed it because, again, I was mowing just a big field, basically. I kept it up around 5 inches. The warm season grasses, depending on your maintenance level, 1.5 to 1 or 1.5 inches. And again, leave those clippings on the lawn. Do not bag them. Leave them there, because you can reduce one of your fertilizations just by leaving your clippings on the lawn. And, you know, if you're using any broadleaf herbicides on the lawn, you certainly want to leave the clippings on the lawn, or bag them and put them in with the trash. Don't put them in your ornamental beds. Don't put them in your vegetable gardens, because what are those plants? Your trees and shrubs, your vegetables, they're broadleaf plants. And so those clippings can have any herbicide residue in them, and it can affect oftentimes, you know, vegetables are a little more sensitive, so it could possibly kill those. Trees and shrubs, you just may see some effects of it, and oftentimes they'll outgrow it. But, you know, if you're using herbicides on your lawn, don't be composting them, because it can persist through the composting process. Leave them on the lawn is the best thing to do. When it comes to irrigation, is it necessary? Well, it is necessary if you're trying to establish a new lawn or if you're renovating a lawn. No, it's not necessarily if you're willing to let the lawn go dormant. So that would be your tall fescue. If you've got an established tall fescue lawn, you don't need to irrigate it. It will survive without irrigation, but if we get a spell of a few weeks where we don't get rain, it will brown out and go dormant, but it will survive. Generally, the rule of thumb for how much to apply a week, per week, if you're gonna irrigate, is 1 inch. 1 inch per week. Now, if you get a ½ inch rain, you're only going to need to irrigate, you know, another ½ inch to get that inch. And usually 1 inch of water will moisten that soil down 6 to 8 inches. And that's what you want. You want to irrigate infrequently, but deeply, because you want those grass roots to move down through the soil so that when it gets hot and dry, they'll have more resources and survive better. And you know, you can take a screwdriver and stick it down in the ground, and you can tell when you hit that harder, dry soil, and you can see how deep the water's gone. You don't have to have any fancy equipment to measure, you know, how much 1 inch is, how long do you have to run your sprinkler. Take you a empty tuna fish can or cat food can, some little container, and set it out there in the yard when you're running your irrigation, and you can see how long it takes you to get to that 1 inch or ½ inch or whatever, because it can vary from place to place based on your water pressure. Let's see. If you have an automatic sprinkler system, make sure it has a rain sensor on it. I don't know how many times it's been pouring down rain and I've seen irrigation systems that are in full force because they don't have a rain sensor. A rain sensor will kick that irrigation system off until the next cycle, you know, and then if you need to adjust it, you can. When's the best time to irrigate? 3 o'clock in the morning till 6 or 7 o'clock. You'll see all types of variations of timing, but the idea is you want to reduce the time that the leaves are wet. So if you have an irrigation system, if you water early morning, you know, not many people are going to get up 3 o'clock and go out there and turn the water on, but this is how golf courses and athletic fields will operate. They'll have automatic systems that come on so that as soon as the sun comes up, that irrigation is finished and the leaves can dry out very quickly. If you do have an irrigation system, September is the time to shut that off, you know, flush it out and drain it, because after September, you don't really need to be irrigating. When it comes to cultivation, core aeration is what's recommended. It enhances water uptake and gas exchange in the soil. You know, all plants need oxygen just as much as they need water, so it opens the soil up. It helps to improve fertilizer uptake. It helps water to percolate into the soil or infiltrate into the soil so you don't have as much runoff. And if you've got a lawn like St. Augustine, which is another warm season grass, and sometimes zoysia too, the more highly maintained a warm season turf grass is, the better chances that a thatch layer can develop. And core aeration can help with that. Instead of having to get out there with a rake and rake that stuff up, you can come through and core aerate, and it pulls up some soil and mixes that up and helps with the breakdown of that thatch layer. It's done with cool season grasses in fall and early spring. And again, you're doing it with these cool season and warm season grasses when they're actively growing so that they can recover, because you are doing some damage to the lawn. The frequency depends on the compaction. I wish I could core aerate my lawn now, but it's too late in the season, and I'm not fully established yet. And I don't want to rip up any of the little plants that I've got that are starting to get established. But when we seeded my yard, we didn't rototill it. It was a cool season tall fescue, and I killed it using glyphosate. And then we overseeded with zoysia. And before the prep for overseeding was, they came in with a core aerating machine that pulled out little plugs like shown in this photo here on the slide. And they just basically kind of tore the lawn up. You know, they went across it in all different directions and pulled all these little plugs out. And then they seeded, and then they top dressed lightly with some compost on top of that. And that was done first part of May in 2016 when we did that. But, you know, cool season grasses, you can do it twice a year. Homeowners, fall and spring. You can rent the machines. It doesn't take too long to do a lawn. So a lot of times people in a neighborhood will go together and rent a machine, and you can do a half a dozen lawns in a day or more. And so that way it's not so expensive for one person. You don't want to use spikes. Spike aerators don't reduce soil compaction. They may punch a hole, which you think of as opening it up, but what do? The hole that they punch has slick sides, and it's been pushed out and compacted out. So it really does not work as well as the core aerators. And you can see the little cores that are pulled out are about a ½ inch in diameter and about 3 inches long. And you can just leave them laying on top of the soil, because within a couple of weeks you won't be able to see. They'll fall apart and disintegrate and fall back down into the soil profile. When it comes to pests, both cool and warm season grasses have pests. The two most common ones are the white grubs, the Japanese beetle grubs. The best time to control those is July and August. When you see one that's as big, and there's nothing in the picture to show you the scale, but that grub on the right is probably an inch or so long. It's too big. You want to control those little grubs when they're little tiny things when they first hatch. The Japanese beetles go to the turf areas. They lay their eggs in June, early July, and then they hatch. And so that's why if you're going to use chemical control, July and August is the time to do it, because those caterpillars are tiny and they're very close to the soil surface. And so that's when they're most susceptible to chemicals. If you wait until next spring, when those bigger grubs are moving up to the soil surface to where they pupate and then come out as adults, they're resistant to the chemicals. So you just would be wasting your money. Fall armyworm is seasonal, and it's spotty because these come up from the south every year. And in the 5 years that I've been here, 1 year I had like 3 calls of people that had armyworms. And they're a caterpillar that of a moth that will come, and it will move across a lawn kind of en masse. And the one lawn I went out and looked at when I got a call, it's probably been 2, maybe 3 years ago, it was amazing that it's a straight line. Here was a house, and the armyworms had moved across their lawn, and the lawn exactly next door, it was a straight line, was just as green as it could be. You know, and by the time they called me, it was too late. There weren't hardly any caterpillars left. And just like with the grub, with the caterpillars, to be effective with chemicals, you have to catch them when those caterpillars are small. And so usually by the time people see the damage, the caterpillars are too big, or they may even be gone. But those are the 2 most common pests that we deal with in turf in North Carolina that I get questions about from homeowners. Now, in the eastern part of the state, they'll deal with a little beetle called a chinch bug, which feeds on the roots of the plants. But I've not seen any or heard any complaints about that one in this area. When it comes to weeds and diseases, it depends, you know, if it's cool season or warm season when you control. Cool season, right now, you should be putting down a pre-emergent for your winter annual weeds. the henbit, the chickweed, the annual bluegrass. The pre-emergence will help to control those. Now, one man's weed is another person's wildflower. People like the henbit. They serve as a source of food for the pollinators in very early spring. But then if you're trying to grow a lawn, a lot of people want it to be pristine. And even with the big problem we had this past winter with the annual bluegrass, you may actually need to use 2 applications of your pre-emergent. So probably one now, and then maybe 8 weeks later, a second application. Warm season grasses, August and September, right now you would only be using a post-emergent, and that's only if you have weeds present. And just spot treat. That's what I've been doing in my lawn, is I just spot treat those broadleaf weeds. But you can also, with the warm season, just like your cool season, put down the pre-emergent for the winter annual weeds.
Debbie, we do have a question.
Okay, sure.
Anne asks, what about stuff like clover and weeds that are prevalent now in fescue? How do you handle those?
That would be a post-emergent broadleaf weed killer. Now, if it's in a cool season grass, then you could overseed it. But if it's in a warm season, you may be leaving a gap in the warm season if you kill that broadleaf weed, and then your winter annuals may come in. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Diseases are not so easy to deal with. First, you have to identify what disease you may have. And then, you have to know if you've got a cool season or warm season grass, because the diseases will be different. Oftentimes most fungicides are preventative. They're not curative. So, if you've already got damage from a disease, it's not going to cure that area, but it might keep it from spreading to other areas of your lawn. Some of them can be chronic. Brown patch can be chronic, so you would put down a fungicide as preventative. And that's what golf courses will do, because their clients, those people who are playing golf, they want that turf to look perfect. And so a lot of fungicides are used on golf courses. With homeowners, unless it's a big problem, oftentimes it won't kill the grass. And when the environmental conditions change that have caused that disease, it may just kind of go away on its own. Because I feel that once you get on that fungicide bandwagon, you just kind of on this wheel where you have to continue to do it. So you need to think about that, because these chemicals are not cheap. They can be pretty expensive. You can buy, usually you have to apply, mix these up and apply them. I'm going back to my weeds. You can buy ones that are the weed control things that are pre-mixed, and just come in a sprayer and you can spray them. But that's mostly for the weeds. I'm not aware of any for diseases other than things like, I'm not aware of any. I can't think of any right now off the top of my head. As far as overseeding goes, we're in the window now for cool season overseeding of grasses. September 5th, October 15th through September 15th is the ideal time frame. In our area, you can push it to October 1, or maybe even later. It just kind of depends on what our weather is like. But the idea is, with the cool season, you want to get some root system established before it does really cool off, because once it cools off, they're not going to grow anymore. Once those soil temperatures drop below 40, 45 degrees, root growth is going to stop. And so you want to kind of have time for that plant to get a significant root system established. Warm season grasses, the time to overseed if you need to do that is late spring or early summer. And you know, a lot of people want a green lawn all year, so when they have these warm season lawns, they'll overseed with annual rye, but it's not recommended anymore, because what happens is the rye produces chemicals that may actually harm that warm season turf. So consider turf paint. Once I get my lawn established, I may play around with turf paint. I'm not sure. But you know, that is an option. And you know, even some of the this is just a little offshoot here, but I watch HGTV a lot, and some of the very small lawns, like out in California where water's so short, they're installing AstroTurf, you know, or artificial turf lawn areas. So if you have a small area, you might consider that. What else could be maintenance free? You go out there and you vacuum your lawn instead of mow it. So what's the trick to a healthy lawn? Well, it's good cultural practices, you know. Choose the right variety, you know. Consider your sun, your shade. Do you want warm season or cool season? Do you have enough sunlight? Are you going to be able to provide moisture if it needs it? You need to have a good soil. You know, your soil needs to be have good fertility. It needs to be at that right pH. Doesn't need to be compacted. And it's good if it has organic matter. Now you can add organic matter fairly easily. It's physical work, but you can top dress 2 or 3 times a year with about 1/4 inch of a quality compost. You don't have, when it's that thin of a layer, you don't have to rake it in. It will settle down through the leaf blades, and the insects and the earthworms will mix it into the soil for you. And over a period of years, you can do that and really build up a much better soil. A fertilizer that's applied at the right time. You know, cool season grasses, the best time is the fall. The warm season grasses, it's spring and early summer. And then make sure you're mowing it at the proper height and the proper frequency. And I didn't touch on that earlier, but ideally when you mow your lawn, you don't take off more than 1/3 of the leaf blade at one time. So that's why I've been having to mow every 3 or 4 days, because I'm fertilizing and the grass is growing so fast. It gets taller than that, and I have to take off more if I wait, you know, a week to mow it. You know, and that's where, you know, have y'all seen these new robotic lawnmowers they've got? They're not cheap. And I think people like Supersod may actually lease them, or, you know, they'll come and set them up in your yard and you pay them a monthly fee. I don't know how it compares to paying a lawn service to come and mow, but those things will mow day or night. And that way you can keep your grass cut at the proper height so that you're not taking off more than 1/3 of your leaf blade at one time. I recently priced a used one with one of the guys in the green industry group I worked with. He said he had some that somebody turned back in, and they were like new but used, $1,700. It was hard for me to justify, though I'd love to have having one for my 2,000 square foot lawn. And then my son pointed out to me, well, Mom, then you wouldn't get any exercise if you weren't push mowing your lawn, you know. But they are out there, so if you have a larger lawn and you might be interested in that, check into it. I think Lowe's or Home Depot had one in a corral out in front of their store, so you can pay different prices for them, but they're still expensive. So this is my lawn, which is a work in progress. The upper left slide is in 2017, so that's we did it from seed in May of 26. No, maybe we did it from seed in May of 2017, because I bought the house in 2016 and moved in. So, okay, so it's been 3 years that I've been working on this. So this was seeded in May of 2017, and you can see in August, it's come in pretty good there. Now, can you see the brown spot over on the left side of the picture? there is a huge willow oak tree just on the other side of the fence in my neighbor's yard. And back up towards the front of the picture on the left-hand side, there's also a red maple. So I've been fighting the competition, not only shade from those two big trees, but root competition. And they really suck the water out of the ground. So you can see here, the bottom right one, in August of this year, I'm making a patio in front of that little shed that's in the very back of the picture. So I dug up a bunch of soil out, to dig down to do my subsurface for my paver patio. And I decided, well, I will just reduce this lawn area up here in the side yard and not have to fight that shade and those tree roots so much as far as the grass goes. So I took cardboard, I laid it down. Well, at first, I'll tell you, first I sprayed glyphosate, which is a Roundup type product. And then I laid down some really thick cardboard, and then I covered it with leaves. And then as I dug out the patio, the paver patio area back there, I piled the soil on top of that. And so then you can see I've stuck in some little perennials, just kind of healed them in until it cools off this fall. I've got some shrubs and some small trees that I will plant in that bed. And then I will just have I don't know, it's maybe a 12-foot wide strip on the left-hand side over there. The grass is starting to come in, but I won't have to worry about as much of it. But you can see over on the right-hand side of this bottom right picture, that gets the sun that it needs during the day. And so it has really come in well. But, it's been 3 years. This is 3 years, and I'm still not quite there yet. Maybe by next year, it'll all look like it does on the right-hand side of this picture. But it's been a struggle. And I'll tell you that the swale that runs there along the roof line, you can see on this bottom right picture, is my garage. And there's a swale that runs parallel to the side of the garage. And we seeded in May, I think on a Wednesday, and planted. And on Sunday, we got a 5-inch gully washer. All grass seed back here washed away. I mean, it went down the drain in the street by my neighbor's garage. And I going and buying a pallet of sod and laying sod in that swale because it was just going to wash away. So the variety of zoysia that I selected is called Zenith. And I selected it specifically because you can purchase the sod and you can purchase the seed. So that way, the sod that I went and got matches the seed plants that I have in my lawn. Now it's a little bit coarser. There are some finer leafed zoysias with darker green leaves that, you might like a little better, but this one worked for me because I wanted something that, I had to go get the sod, but I also seeded it. And the seed wasn't cheap. The seed, I think, if I can remember, was about $60 for 2, maybe it was 4 pounds. I can't remember, but it was not cheap either. So it's been an experience, and it's just been one of those things that I had never done because I always lived somewhere where I didn't have the money or it was too large of an area to do. So that just shows you, and I've learned as I've gone. This summer, I was putting down fertilizer to fill in these bare spots. And I put down some fertilizer, about a month ago, and thought it was going to rain. So I didn't water. I didn't water that fertilizer in. It didn't rain, and I started getting these little brown patches of the lawn. And it was fertilizer burn because I should have watered that stuff in. What happens when it's dry is the fertilizer will pull water out of the leaf blades of the plants, and so you get the fertilizer burn. So I've been watering it, and it's going to recover, but it's just like, why did I do that? I should have known better. So I've had water going today, working on getting those spots filled in before it gets cold. So I just put some resources up here for you. Turf Files is an awesome website. And so, you know, I can send you this presentation and you can have these, but all of these you can do a Google search and you should be able to get them pop up. If you type in turf files and NCSU, it will pop right up. Same thing with Carolina Lawns. Turf Files is a website. All of these are NCSU websites, but I use Turf Files for all the years that I worked in Extension up in Virginia because it is just an awesome site. It's got all the possible grasses you might want to grow. It's got information on weeds, and all of these have photos, diseases, and recommendations for control and timing. The Carolina Lawns is part of the is on the Turf Files website. It is a nice color publication geared towards homeowners. So it talks about, you know, what do you do, selection and irrigation and mowing and all of those cultural things that you need to do to have a good lawn. And then there are lawn maintenance calendars specific to the different types of grasses: tall fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, centipede, Bermuda, zoysia. You can pull up all of these calendars based on the type of grass that you have in your lawn, and it gives you a maintenance calendar. Here's when you should fertilize. Here's when you should be looking at putting down pre-emergent herbicides, those types of things. And then last resort, of course, is chemicals, but we do have what's called the North Carolina Agricultural Chemical Manual. It's a mouthful. You can access it online. They have chapters in there on insects, on disease, on weed control, and they make chemical recommendations. Now you have to read a little bit because when it comes to the weed one, it will tell you the chemicals, and then you have to read the fine print over on the right-hand side, what weeds it will control. So it's not the easiest thing to do. My best suggestion, but I'll tell you, this chemical manual has chapters on fruits and vegetables. And then if you might have animals or field crops, it's all in this manual. So it's a good resource for folks. But if you have weed problems or disease problems, the best place to go is to the Turf Files, because then you can figure out what disease, what weed you have, and right there it gives you control recommendations. You know, ideally, if you can do something culturally or mechanically, adjust your fertilizer, your mowing height, those types of things. Do those things first. And what I've been doing this summer is hand weeding. I've hand weeded a lot, but then I have also spot treated with broadleaf herbicide. Because, you know, some of those weeds that have the little taproot on them are harder to pull up. And then some of them just pop back up so quick, I can't keep up with them. And so my way to control them this summer has been to go in there and spot treat with broadleaf herbicide. But anytime you use a chemical, when you buy any pesticide, the label is the law. And you basically agreed to a contract that you're going to follow what the label instructions are. And that means you're going to apply it to the labeled site for the labeled pest. You're going to apply it at the correct rate, and you're going to wear the proper PPE, which is personal protective equipment. And the minimum usually is long sleeve shirt, long pants, shoes, and socks. Others, you know, may say you need to wear goggles, you need to wear a face shield, you may need to wear an apron. Hopefully as homeowners, you won't get into anything, you know, that requires much more than the basic stuff. But there are some out there that require, maybe just when you're mixing it up, because when you're mixing it, you're more exposed to the concentrate than when you're applying it. So sometimes it will say when you're mixing it, you need to have this personal protective equipment. If you're the applicator, you need to have this. But the label is the law, and you really should be reading that label. And you know, it's tiny, tiny fine print 4 or 5 times, you know, before you purchase it, before you mix it, before you use it, before you dispose of it, before you store it. And because the fine print on those labels is so small, nowadays you can go online and you can find the labels online and read them, you know, at a size where you can actually see them. But that's all had. So if
Well,
you
Debbie,
haven't-
we do have one more question.
Sure.
Yeah, so this is, and you sort of hit on it, but she's being a little more specific. She
Okay.
said, this is Patricia, and she says she has a lot of weeds in her lawn, and does she need to do something to those before she aerates and seeds, or will winter kill off the weeds?
If she's got warm season weeds like crabgrass and some other broadleaves or grassy weeds, I know I had crabgrass and goosegrass in my lawn, and I simply pulled those out. Depending on how big your lawn is, you may need to use a broadleaf post-emergent herbicide, you know, and whether it's a grassy weed or a broadleaf weed will make a difference on the product that you use. And
We
if
have
you need-
another. Go ahead.
Yeah, if she needs help identifying the weeds, she can take photos and email them to me, and I can try to identify them that way. Or she can go on the Turf Files website and try to figure out herself, if, you know, whichever she'd prefer. I'm happy to make the best effort with photographs.
The next question was about moss. Can I just overseed on top of moss?
Moss can be indicators of several different problems in the lawn. Shade, compacted soil, too wet, low pH. And I went to and did a site visit last week, and the lady had trees, so she had shade. She had competition with tree roots, so it was dry, but the soil was also looked fairly compacted, and she had moss. But it's like, where do you start? You start with a soil test and you see where your pH is. More than likely the pH is low and you're going to need to add some lime. Now in Union County, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, you can pick up soil test kits at the extension office. We're at 3230 Preston Road, Monroe. Or to save people who live at the opposite end of the county having to drive, I have all these soil test kits at the libraries, and I just last week resupplied them all. So you can walk into the library in Indian Trail or Waxhaw or Marshville or even in Monroe and ask for a soil test kit and get one, and it'll save you a drive. Okay.
Okay, I think that's the last question. This was fantastic, even for those of us who don't have lawns. I actually learned planting. I'm not anti-lawn, I'm just lazy. Yeah, really, I have weeds, I don't have lawn. But I did want to mention to everybody who's still with us that on October the 1st, we will have our next Successful Gardener meeting, and we're going to have Dr. Barbara Fair, who is with NCSU, and she is the expert on plant identification, selection, maintenance, and planting of trees. And October is a great time to plant some trees. So she's going to help us figure out what to plant and how to plant it, because there's no need to waste a lot of money on a really expensive tree and then don't plant it right. It's not hard, but it's easy to do it wrong. So we'll see you all then, hopefully at 7 o'clock on October the 1st. And thank you again, Debbie. This was awesome.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.